My ex may have been avoidant, but I was not. I was always ready to dive headfirst into our problems and figure out what they were and how to solve them. I wanted to tackle things, he wanted to run away. And this was how things continually played out in our relationship, with me always trying to push for us to get together, talk things out, work it through, and him always wanting to avoid, stay away, run away, be quiet, not face things. This was just how things always played out in our relationship, you know. The thing that I talk about a lot here on the channel is how he used to give me the silent treatment and how much that hurt and how hard that was to deal with. I think that was his way of processing things. Maybe he couldn't talk through his emotions. I don't know. Maybe that's how he handled his emotions, was to just kind of like sit on them and wait for them to pass or something. But that left me in the dark, and that wasn't working for me. Because ultimately, whenever the problem came up again, we never resolved how to handle that problem. We never talked about the emotions from the last time it came up, and so every time a problem came up again, those emotions were magnified. Sometimes I would wonder to myself, is it that he's blaming himself? Is it that he's taking it personally and that's why he's being silent and just waiting for the shame to pass? Really, I'll never know, because he never discussed things with me, and that's part of the problem of this avoidant behavior, is that it's like he gets to decide how things are done, and then I'm left alone trying to understand what's even happening. And as I said, when the problem came up again, as it always would, we wouldn't have the tools to work through it. Another way that he was avoidant was to come home late from work. Now, obviously, there would be times when he needed to be at work, and that's okay, that's normal, that's part of every relationship, that's part of work. But pretty consistently, when we were going through a rough patch in our relationship, I could expect that he was going to spend more time at work and he was going to come home later, and this was a way of avoiding the problem. Once again, not only did this leave us without answers to the problems in the first place, but it left me to myself wondering what was going on and having to fill in the blanks of where he was and what he was doing, because just because he said that he was at work, you know how it is. You don't just believe immediately that all the time your ex is at work. And to be truthful, he wound up cheating on me. So another avoidance strategy, that he decided to cheat. So my fears at the time that he was doing something else were justified. Hopefully I don't have to explain to anybody why cheating is not good for a relationship and why it's an avoidant behavior, because you're investing your intimacy into somebody else where it should be invested with your relationship and working on the problems that you're having with your current partner. There were times though when my ex was open to talking about things. Typically though, this was done through an email sent to me at a time when we weren't together, like we weren't in the same room or the same home or same area. So although for him this might not have been avoidant behavior, because for him this might have been the best that he could do to reach out, it was still generally avoidant, and it didn't help us really solve problems that well, because whenever I would respond to an email, the most that would happen is when he would give me like the silent treatment, it would get lifted. We never really resolved anything. Maybe this sounds like something that you've gone through. I do want to give a word of caution though. It is normal for us to avoid people when we're feeling hurt. It is normal for us to want to be alone and withdraw when we're experiencing pain and we're not sure how to communicate it. These things can manifest in personality traits that are maladaptive though, and they can turn into a personality disorder, like avoidant personality disorder. So if this is something that you've experienced with your ex, I don't want you to be angry or nasty towards them, because this may just be a psychological issue. And though this doesn't make it okay, and it doesn't take away the pain, because believe me, it hurt me a lot, even if this was some kind of psychological issue with my ex, I'll never know, because I'm not a therapist, and you're not a therapist either. Well, okay, some of you might be, but you get what I'm saying here. We gotta be careful when we talk about these things, because we don't know what somebody's going through, even if they're our ex, even if we've had intimate conversations with them, we still don't always know. Well, after going through this relationship with my ex, I shouldn't have been surprised about the way that the breakup happened, that he was the one who initiated the breakup, and during the breakup, he continually tried to avoid everything. But his avoidance left me scrambling, because I was trying to keep this relationship together. I did not want to break up, and so his avoidance only drove me further to try to figure out what was going on and to solve it. So let's talk about some things that I did. Well, one thing that I did a lot during our relationship was that I tried to apologize. I just kind of caved in. I just kind of said, you know what, it's my fault, I can do better, and let him be the one who was the winner, I guess, or the one who was right. And I really just kind of did that because I didn't want the silent treatment to continue, and I just wanted things to continue. I didn't want to break up, so I figured that was the best way to solve this problem. It wasn't. And it wasn't because there's always two people involved in a relationship, and it was never 100% my fault for the reason why things were happening. In fact, most of the time I didn't even understand why the silent treatment was being given in the first place. So not a good strategy to just apologize for everything. Something else that I did a lot was to just try to give him his space and give him time to think things through. And I do think that sometimes this was the best strategy because, again, I didn't have all the information. I didn't know how to help. And this seemed to at least get him in a better mood. And it did lift the silent treatment sometimes after some time passed. So I figured maybe that's just how he processes things. As I mentioned earlier, though, this leaves me out of the equation and how I'm feeling, and we just wound up having the same problems over and over again. So again, maybe a good temporary strategy, but not the best way to solve these problems. Another thing that I used to try a lot was to just plain confront him. You know, even if he was giving me the silent treatment, just be like, well, what's going on? Let's talk about this. I'm not going to do this silent thing. And that didn't go over so well, as you can imagine. One way that I tried to confront him was to get him to go into couples therapy with me. And actually, I think that that was a good strategy to combat some of that avoidance, because that avoidance was ruining our relationship. And I felt like somebody else could help us work through what was going on. From what I could tell, though, the therapy was not easy for him. And so he started to avoid the therapy. First, he just avoided talking in the therapy about how he was feeling and just generally wasn't so engaged. But then he just started leaving therapy once we got towards the breakup stage. So even having a therapist in the ring with us was not really helping that much. Another thing that I tried was to ask him what it was that he wanted and then give it to him. Something that he continually complained about was not getting enough physical affection in our relationship, so I started giving it to him, even though that was really hard for me to do. And yet, it didn't seem like that really changed anything. In fact, I think there were some times when I gave him more physical affection, and that only made him pull away more. Ultimately, he did break up with me, and we have not gotten back together. So I hope what you can see from all of this is that sometimes you can do everything in your power to try to work on a relationship, but if somebody is avoidant and they don't want to change that avoidant behavior, there's really not much that you can do about it. And it may be confusing if they move on to somebody else and they don't avoid that person, but believe me, it will come up again. Those problems do not go away. For me, I feel better knowing that I tried everything I could to make this relationship work. I exhausted all my options, and that makes me feel good now, having it all ended, knowing that I didn't give up. I did everything that I could. I do want to be clear here, though, that you can spend a lot of time trying to bend your life around somebody else to get them to appreciate you, to get them to validate you, to try to keep things working when it's just not going to work because they don't want to change. So please be mindful of how much time you spend trying to keep this person in your life. It's possible that the breakup will be enough for them to have to look inward and see what went wrong. We don't know that. We won't know that until the future. Now, I want to turn the tables on you. When have you been avoidant in a relationship and why? Let me know down below in the comments.